Hey, this is Stephen Amell, and you are listening to Tomorrow's Legends, the podcast. Don't fail your city.
Well, fellow mutants, welcome to the new show on Cybercast Network. Starting very soon, in fact, tomorrow, is the new X-Men 97 animated series on Disney+, which is a direct sequel to the very popular 92 animated series simply called X-Men the Animated Series. That ran for 5 seasons, and we are going to be covering it here on the Tomorrow's Legends channel. And when I say we, I mean I'm not alone on this new venture. Although you may know me as The Flash, I can't be using my DC hero name on a Marvel show, so I'm switching it up for this one and pulling in my second favorite mutant, because I can't be Rogue, of course. For this series, you're going to know me as Havok. And with me on this journey is someone you may have heard before on this show, someone who has a lot of knowledge and is going to bring it all to the show. She's jumping over to the hosting side of things this time. Let's welcome my new co-host, Abbey, formerly known as Dreamweaver, but her new identity is going to be Shadowcat. Woo!
Hello, everyone. Happy to be here.
Yeah. So we got a new show. X-Men is kicking off, and we're both very excited. We're huge X-Men nerds, but Shadowcat here has a much more recent knowledge than I do. She's just recently gone through the entire series, and she's heavily into the comic book, so I'm going to be drawing on her for all of her knowledge, because it's been a while for me.
Yeah, I think we get to it a little bit further down in one of the questions, but I haven't, not in chronologically since the 80s, because I wasn't alive then, sorry to say, but I've been reading the comics from the 70s and 80s pretty much all the way up till the modern comics right now, so
perfect.
Pretty in-depth knowledge.
That's what I'm gonna, you're gonna be like my X-Men version of D Vizzle on the Star Wars podcast.
Yeah.
He's the encyclopedia, you're gonna be the encyclopedia, so
yes,
I'm just bringing the fandom, so this is gonna be good. Well, let's dive into, we got a little bit of news to talk about what the show is all about. Let's go into that. Do I have a news clip? I must have let's do it in the news clip.
We interrupt this podcast for a special report.
Because we got to keep the show in the same vein. Everyone is used to us, so let's keep it going. So let's talk about what's coming up. What can we expect from X-Men this season?
Yeah, so X-Men 97, it starts Wednesday, March 20th. And it's going to drop the first 2 episodes on Disney+. So we're going to get the first 2 30-minute episodes. At least I believe they're half-hour episodes long. You never know with streaming.
Yeah, that's true.
And then it's going to be actually 1 a week on Wednesdays for 8 more consecutive weeks. So it's actually going to be 10 episodes long. And I'm really glad they're doing 1 episode at a time and not the binge model. So we can actually have things to look forward to.
Yes.
Which will be really nice.
So agree with you there.
And because of that, it will be a quick turnaround time for our recordings. We will be recording on Thursday nights to cover the show. So you listeners out there will have just about 2 days to get in your feedback if you want to send us some, which you can send emails and voicemails just as the same as you have on all of the Tomorrow's Legends shows to the same email you are using. So that's tomorrowslegendspodcast@gmail.com.
Right. So we're trying to keep everything relatively the same, like she just said, everything you've been used to for all these years, voicemail and email. We have to record on Thursday nights because, we record the regular Legend shows on Fridays. So we're just trying to find a schedule that fits. And I know it's a short turnaround, 2 days, but do your best. Now, one last question I have for you. We're going to talk a little bit more about this, but just so people have a rough idea, is this show new or is it a reboot?
Neither. Technically,
Oh.
It's going to be a direct sequel to the 92 series, so not really a reboot, it's just a continuation. So it's going to take place after the last one. It's going to be the same continuity as 92. Right. So if you want to catch up on the old show, if you haven't already, going into the 97 premiere, all 5 of the seasons are on Disney+. I will preface that some of the watching order on Disney Plus is a little wrong.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, as some of the older animation shows are, because they just not all of the records of when they aired, or they aired out of date because of conflicts on the original network schedule. So some of them are all over the place if you do watch the original. So just keep that in mind if you are watching for the first time.
Yeah. Good, but it's a good way to catch up. I mean, it is only going to be 10 episodes this season. So, and I believe the old show, it was like 13 episodes, 12 episodes, 19 episodes. It's a little bit all over the place, but it's not a lot to catch up. Don't feel like you're overwhelmed. Oh my God, I got 50 episodes per season. They're relatively short. So, yeah, and I'm sure you can Google somewhere. There might be an essentials list if you want to look that up and only just watch like 10 episodes or something. Yeah, but so we're going to dive into it. We're going to talk about the trailers. We're going to talk about the characters that are returning. We're going to talk about, just our overall initial feelings and what we're looking forward to. That's what this preview episode is all about, because we're going to be kicking it off just in a couple days already with the new show. So let's get into some discussion. And I got some fun clips. We're going to work the show out as we go, but I got some fun clips to play as we go along. So let's see what we can do here. How about a clip from Rogue to introduce our discussion?
You look nervous as a long-tailed cat in a room full of rocking chairs.
Yes, the classic.
Yes, Rogue. We're going to talk about Rogue, but I love her voice. All right, let's kick it off for discussion. What's the first thing we're going to get into?
Yeah, so I mentioned a little earlier, but I think just to really kick off our discussion before we actually dive into the show itself, I think because we are coming from DC shows, and most of our audience listeners will probably know more of our background on DC, I think it might be good if, now that we're diving into Marvel for the first time, I think on this feed, talk a little bit about why we wanted to cover this and what our background and history is with the X-Men. I know we covered it a little bit briefly, but for you, I'm going to have to get used to calling you Havok and not Flash. But so why are you an X-Men fan? Like, what got you into X-Men?
See, that's a great question. A good idea to kick off the show too. When I started reading comics in the 80s, I was drawn to Spider-Man initially. So there was just something about his costume, something about his attitude, and just everything about him rang true to me. And from that, when going to the local comic book store to look at comics, I just noticed the X-Men. What is all that? Like, who are these people on the cover? And, you ask questions when in the store, learned a little bit about them, and just grabbed a couple issues and started reading. And back in those days, in the 80s and the 90s, I was buying everything. Like, I bought Captain America, I bought Fantastic Four, I bought Thor, I bought Iron Man, I bought all of it, because once I got hooked big time. But as it started going on, I mean, I'm just a kid. I get like a $5 a week allowance, and I blew it on comics all the time. So I had to really trim it back, because, what ones do I really like? So it became Amazing Spider-Man and the X-Men. I think it was called the Uncanny X-Men back then. Mm-hmm. Those are the ones I read. If you look at my comic book collection, the X-Men and Spider-Man fill up my entire collection. I've got boxes of them. And so that's where it started. I just discovered them by chance. But I think part of your question was why? Why the X-Men? Mm-hmm. I loved how relatable they were. First of all, they weren't overpowered. Most of the X-Men have one singular ability. And they had to figure out how can they best deploy or employ or use that ability to help them out in whatever situation, whether they're a hero, even whether they're a villain, or whether they're just a regular person trying to survive and not have anybody know about their abilities. They had to figure them out, because, it allowed them to have weaknesses. It allowed them to have counters to them, where they couldn't, like, villains would counter them and they couldn't face off against them without any help. And they're just regular people. Like, it really, the stories for the X-Men really were things that we could understand, because they dealt with racism, and they dealt with bullying, and they dealt with, segregation from the government, and people trying to trap them and experiment on them, and just it just was realistic world problems that they had to deal with, and it just felt a lot more grounded and real. And I mean, that's the serious side of it, but the fun side of it, I mean, I fell in love with Rogue. I fell in love with Wolverine and Cyclops and all these characters. They were voiced so well once the cartoon came out, but they all had such personality. And They all had there's so many great stories. When you read the X-Men comics, there is so many great stories that went on for multiple issues. You know, whether they fought the Brood, or they were trapped on the Savage Lands, or Magneto's coming to attack, or they're dealing with Juggernaut, or Jean Grey and how she's becoming the Phoenix. And there's so many stories, and we can talk about them for hours. I think X-Men was probably one of the best written comics, and that's why I stuck with it.
Yeah. And I know, so you're going with your second favorite mutant in Havok.
Yeah.
But why Havok specifically? Because I know he's not a lot of people's like probably favorite or in their top 10.
No.
So what is it about Havok?
He's I have him here too. Where is he? I've got a little Havok.
I see your little rogue. So
yeah, little rogue's right in front of me because she's my favorite. Where is he? I'll have to find. I do have a little Havok, very similar to Rogue here. It's funny. Havok is not a very popular X-Men because he was only in the comics every once in a while. He's Cyclops' brother. He wasn't even in the animated series. I can't.
One episode.
Yeah, and he was not really. They used him in one of the movies, and they didn't really use him that much. I can't remember. There was the one where all the younger characters.
First Class.
First Class. That's it. Yeah. Gambit. It's just because him and Cyclops are related. They have a similar ability. And Cyclops is cool, yes, shoots laser beams out of his eyes, but something about Havok's ability, because he blasted these energy things out of his chest or his arms, depending on who was writing the stories. And I'm trying to even remember how I can properly, and you might have to correct me, because he also gains his ability, like it's solar energy, right? Mm-hmm. That he blasts, like he absorbs energy from the sun, and then he can convert that to a blast of heat, a blast of solar radiation, I guess is how you describe it, right?
Basically, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I was just fascinated because you've heard me on the podcast always complain about everybody has hand blasts. That's all everybody does is hand blasts. Havok was one of the first that was really focusing that energy. I just thought it was cool. I mean, you know, when I was a teenager, it didn't take a lot to hook me. I just thought Havok was cool. He had these amazing blasts, like you're blasting solar radiation and, you know, melting people, blowing them up, whatever. I just thought, hey, he's pretty cool. Like that's cooler than Cyclops. I even dressed. I'll have to find you a picture and say I even dressed up of him. I cosplayed as him once, so
nice.
Did my best Havok. But that's my Havok. There isn't a big deep dive into why. I just thought he was really cool. I liked his ability, and he was a little bit on the edge, and you know, him and Cyclops didn't always get along. So yeah. But I'm gonna turn it around on you. What is your history with the X-Men, and why is Shadowcat your favorite?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for me, the X-Men were my very first comic book that I ever picked up. When I started reading comics when I was in high school, I was 14, around that age.
Yeah.
My English teacher at the time was also a very big X-Men fan, and suggested to me that if I wanted to start into comics, I should start with the X-Men, because she thought I would really like them. And so my very first issue, I guess it was a graphic novel from the 80s, in, you know, Chris Claremont, who is one of like the most famous X-Men writers doing all of these. It was God Loves, Man Kills. I don't know if you're familiar with that one.
I'm not gonna remember all the titles, but yeah.
But it's one of the more famous ones. And that one, it deals really heavily with like religious topics and kind of that against the mutants. And so very heavy, probably for my first ever comic book to pick up.
What a story to jump into.
But it was my first one, and at that point, even then, I was like, there's a lot of meaning here. Like doesn't seem like a normal comic book to me. Like they're actually delving into real topics. They're delving into things that actually matter. It's, you know, it's not just all. And with the X-Men, there's a ton of just fun, silly comic book sci-fi things that do happen, which can be really fun, but then they, like you said, they delve into really relatable and real topics, and don't shy away from those things usually. So, you know, they deal with, you know, bigotry and hate, and like most of their main villains are just like regular people who hate mutants. And that's pretty relatable to a lot of people, especially when, you know, a younger as a teenager getting into all this stuff, like teenage years are very weird and tough. And you're trying to find your place and you kind of feel like an outsider. So I was really drawn to kind of the X-Men. And I love like the found family stuff, and the X-Men are huge in that, kind of being able to bring people in. Yeah. And, as someone who's dealt with that my whole life in various degrees, and different issues, like the X-Men have always stood out to me in like the kind of stories that they tell, and that's why I've been reading them for over a decade, and I've gone back and read all the ones from the 80s and the 70s, and all the ones before I was born. Yeah. So once from there, I read all the comics. I went and found any piece of media with the X-Men I could, so all of the animated series, the anime. Watched all the movies to varying degrees of enjoyment.
They're not all that good, yeah.
No. But yeah, I've been basically obsessed with them ever since. They're my favorite comic books. They're my favorite superhero team. Most of my favorite characters come from the X-Men. And so to the second part of that question, like why Shadowcat?
Yeah. She's popular. Like she's definitely more popular than Havok.
She is. Yeah. She is, and I think for good reason, but also like she was Kitty Pryde was created as kind of a self-insert character. Like she was the teenager that first, was brought into the X-Men team. So a lot of people could relate, kind of see the X-Men through their eyes as almost like a reader back in the 80s. And so it kind of worked the same for me because I was 14 when I first picked up, my comic book. So I was already relating to her at that age.
Yeah.
And she was in the God Loves Man Kills in that book pretty prominently. And like she's 14 in the book. And she's standing up to this preacher who is calling for the death of all mutants, and she's just like in his face, and I'm like, damn, like that's kind of who I want to be as a 14-year-old, is being able to call that out and have that courage to like stand my ground. Yeah, so and a lot of the books since, because I kind of started in the 80s, which is weird. I must say, I was reading these in the 2010s because that's when I was in high school. Sorry for the age drop, but
no, it's okay.
So I went back and I read a lot of the older ones, and she's in a lot of those. Yeah. And she's, she has the ability to phase, so basically she can walk through walls, do all this cool stuff, and that's a unusual power, I think, for a lot of superheroes. She's not having these huge energy blasts, or she doesn't have super strength and all these things. So it's a different power, but I like it. And she's also a big computer nerd. She's a computer genius, and she has a pet dragon named Lockheed, which is always fun. And a ton of other stuff. So I just really felt drawn to her and kind of grew up with the character, as well as she was like growing up into adulthood. And, in the most recent comics, she was actually a pirate captain, which was very fun.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I have, when you were looking for your little guys, I haven't painted it yet, but I have a 3D printed model of her as Captain Kate Pryde, which is very fun.
That is very cool looking.
I'm going to paint that at some point when I feel confident enough to paint it.
Well, what I liked about Shadowcat is like when she first brought on the scene, I think a lot of people were like, "Yay, she can phase. What good is she to the team? How can she fight? She can't do anything." But they found such creative ways for her to use that ability because she can partially fade and grab onto things and phase them through walls, which helps for for doing different things. But you'll see here she can phase half of her body out while their other part is solid. And it's neat. Like I can't even do her justice, but they have really found creative ways to use that ability. That's made her very, very helpful to the team.
Yeah, she's scary when she wants to be, and she's a trained ninja, which I forgot to mention, which is also just fun.
She's gotten older. I mean, the movies may not have been that great, but I think one of the best scenes in it was X-Men 3 was with Shadowcat when they were when Juggernaut was chasing her. And they were in some facility, and she was running from room to room. So she was phasing through each wall, and he was smashing through them trying to catch her. And it was just a really neat scene because it was one of those great epic chase moments, kind of similar to Captain America: Winter Soldier when he was chasing Bucky, Bucky was running on the
he's
roof.
just plowing.
And he's plowing through the walls. It's the same kind of thing. She's phasing through all the walls, and Juggernaut's just hot on her tail trying to catch up to her, and she eventually phases through the floor and gets away from him. But very cool. She's neat. Very, very cool. Well, let's talk about the show now, and what characters can we expect to be returning here. So some of the main cast, if you guys don't remember from the original show, we've got Wolverine, Gambit, Rogue, Cyclops, Jean Grey, Jubilee, Beast, Storm, and Morph. I didn't realize Morph was back, because he died in the premiere episode of the original series, did he not?
He did. Then he got better, as you do in the X-Men world.
Got better? You mean he was brought back to life?
Yeah, he wasn't fully dead, but they thought he had died.
Oh, okay.
So he comes back in season 2 with and he's being mind controlled by Mr. Sinister. So
right.
We'll see if that plays into anything in this 97.
Yeah, we'll have to see. Because I got a question for you. I got a screenshot up here of all the characters, and there's one guy I don't recognize, and I wonder if that's him, maybe.
Probably.
So those are the main cast. Now, what I did, I looked up on, was it Internet Movie Database and somewhere else? I looked up the cast of everybody that's on there, and then it seemed to be some of the side characters. We got Nightcrawler, Sunspot, Bishop, and Magneto. I think Magneto might be a more prominent role. We'll talk about that later. But it also listed Colossus and Kitty Pryde. But you're saying, like I saw it somewhere listed. When I looked up X-Men 97 cast, I saw those two also included in it. So, I mean, Colossus was one of the main guys, like, sort of, not main cast, but he was a supporting member that was always around.
Yeah, I have not seen either of their names in any of the articles or things that I've read about supporting characters, but like if they show up, I will be obviously happy if Kitty Pryde gets to show up since she wasn't in the 92 series. Yeah,
that would be cool if they include them. Yeah, so those are your characters that are returning, and then the villain, what it looks like, is going to be Mr. Sinister. You got any more about it? As far as I can tell from what I've read, that seems to be, it's going to be based on him for the 10 episodes.
Yeah, and there's kind of more detailed when we get into like the trailer breakdowns and things.
Okay.
But that's what I've read also, is Mr. Sinister is going to be a prominent villain. If he's going to be more background or like central focus, I'm not sure, because it feels like with him, he'll be a little bit more of a background until probably like at the end of the season. Because I know based on the trailers and what we know too, it seems like a lot of what's going to be at the forefront is kind of that bigotry against mutants, and so like the Friends of Humanity, they're going to be in there, so that main group that's against mutants, for sure. Right. Their logo's been on a lot of things, and like if you see the guys who are kind of look like semi-military dress, not the ones in the helicopter that come down, but just like street level, those are the Friends of Humanity.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, because there's a shot with a bunch of, they look like military commandos. They're like in a blue and silver outfit, and they're shooting laser guns at somebody. Yeah.
It's not them.
Okay.
No.
So they're probably just some army group. Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll wait to see them when they show up. Now let's talk about, like, this surprised me, because this show originally aired in 92, so we're how many years later now? And they are bringing back a lot of the voice cast. And I think that is so cool. Almost the entire cast is reviving their roles. And you'll break it down a little bit more. I think with the exception of Cyclops, because the voice actor Norm Spencer has passed away a little while ago. So they're passing Cyclops' role on to Ray Chase. And then Jubilee is going to be voiced by Holly Chu instead of Allison Court. And I believe Allison was offered the role, but she turned it down. She says, nope, I want Jubilee to be actually voiced by an Asian voice actor. And I believe that's who they brought in with Holly Chu. So
Yes. Yeah. But Allison Court will be another character. I've seen some rumors of who she's going to play, but I'm not sure if we're 100% certain of who she's going to be yet.
Right. Cool. So, I mean, most of the cast, so Wolverine will be there, Cyclops, like all these, most of the characters are going to be there. So what do you have here as to, there's going to be a few changes in the voice cast?
Yeah, there's a few. So I think a good, almost like half the cast is going to return as their original characters. So obviously like Cal Dot as Wolverine and all of them. But Chris Potter, so he originally was the voice of Gambit in the 92. He's now going to voice Cable. And so the voice actor for Gambit now is AJ I'm so sorry if I pronounce his name incorrectly, but AJ Lacosia.
Sure, looks close enough to me.
And then Catherine Disher, who is the original Jean Grey, is now going to voice Val Cooper, which is really interesting. And she's been replaced by Jennifer Hale, who's probably a familiar name to a lot of people who watch animation regularly. She actually played Jean in the Wolverine and the X-Men animated series that only lasted one season, and yeah. I think she also voiced her in the X-Men anime. So she has experience playing Jean already.
I wonder why they changed with that one. I wonder why.
Maybe just age. It might be an age factor. Can't quite get to the voice.
Yeah. Okay.
Originally.
So who is Val Cooper? That's a character I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Val Cooper in the comics, and I'm assuming probably going to be pretty similar in her role in the animated series here. She originally was kind of like a government liaison for there's so many. X Factor, one of them. I think X Factor, which was the team of the 5 original X-Men that worked for the government for a little bit in like the late 80s, 90s, kind of a thing. But she's been a kind of a government liaison to the X-Men and certain teams throughout all the years. So I am assuming she's going to be coming to play in a similar role in 97.
Yeah. Okay. That'll be cool. Well, the one that I am most excited about is Lenore Zan, who is Rogue. She's coming back as Rogue. Part of the reason why I fell in love with Rogue so much is because of her voice in the animated series. It's something about the way Lenore voices her with that Southern Belle accent, and it's just beautiful. I fell in love with Rogue just because of her voice. She's amazing, and I mean, there's so many things here. Let me see. I got. Let me try this one.
My daddy always said 2's company and 3's an eavesdropper.
I mean, she just has it perfectly nailed down. So anyway, I'm excited about her coming back. I wonder if she's going to still be able to do it the same.
Yeah, she's great. I think she's a lot of people's definitive Rogue. When they're reading Rogue, they probably hear her voice.
Exactly. Definitive Rogue, and also the look of Rogue, like the way she looked in the animation with her green and yellow with the brown leather jacket. That is Rogue to me. I never liked the green and white outfit that they tried to do for a while there. It's got to be the green and yellow. That's Rogue. So, but yeah, like that was perfectly described. Definitive. So let's talk about the synopsis of the show. I think we'll get into it a little bit more once we start breaking down the trailer. But from what I read, I just kind of reworded a little bit here. After losing their leader, Professor Charles Xavier, the X-Men try to continue on without his leadership, with Storm and Wolverine sharing the duties. But then Magneto comes in, offering his help to be their new leader. Meanwhile, Mr. Sinister is plotting to end the X-Men once and for all, and the team has to overcome new challenges to be able to defend against him. They have not given much as to what's going on, but that's the overall cue of these 10 episodes. Anything else you can add to that?
No, I mean, I think they're holding it probably pretty tight to their chest, like more description until it actually comes out. So obviously we'll find out tomorrow how the first 2 episodes go.
That's true.
But I think that's okay. I think they've definitely given enough to get us all excited, but they haven't given away like all of the story, so we're going to be all surprised.
Which is good.
So I think that's a pretty good. It's a brief description, but I think that's mostly the info we have so far.
Yes, which is good. I mean, it's only 10 episodes, so I don't want them to give anything away. There's a few. We're going to talk about the trailer, and there's a few things that they have given away, but it's not major, so we'll get into it. Now, I got some questions for you, because I need a refresher, and people that have maybe not watched the original 5 seasons and maybe don't have the time to go back to it, because this show is taking place right after the original. Remind us how the original series ended. What killed Professor X? What happened in that whole final couple episodes?
So in the finale of 92. It's called Graduation Day. It's actually a very moving episode, I think, for an animated show.
Yeah.
There wasn't, unfortunately, because it's how a lot of animated shows work, they got kind of canceled or told to wrap up a little more unceremoniously instead of like being able to do a full like season-long arc and being able to wrap everything up. So it kind of came a little abruptly, this ending, but in Graduation Day, so Professor X, he gets mortally wounded by Henry Gyrick, who is kind of one of those main anti-mutant bigot, works for the government, funds a lot of anti-mutant things that happen.
Right.
He wounds Xavier to the point where basically the only thing that could potentially save his life is alien technology. Like everything, our like Earth medical technology isn't going to help him. He's essentially dying. So in that episode, Lilandra, who is from the Shi'ar, so if you know the Phoenix and the Dark Phoenix saga, she's a pretty main character in that.
She kind of is like Professor X's space girlfriend.
Yeah. Yep, pretty much.
She's an alien from an alien race, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, but you're right.
So, yeah, they get her to come back, and basically Xavier is dying. They get Magneto to come, and first possibly try to save him, but also to kind of pay his respects in case Xavier is fully dying. But Xavier ends up heading to space with Lilandra to try to get saved after he gives very moving speeches to all of the X-Men individually.
Yep.
So in this, if we're picking up right after, so I can see it going one of two ways. So either they're actually going to kill Xavier, like the technology didn't work and he actually dies, or they're staging his death on Earth to cover the fact that he actually went to space, and just using that as a cover story. Right. So I'm interested to see what way it goes.
Kind of sounds like, what's his name from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., who went to hide in space in all the movies. Why can't I think of his name? Samuel L. Jackson's character.
Oh, Fury.
Fury, yeah. Fury's hiding in space, and everyone thought he was dead. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, cool. Well, I wonder if they're going to open with that. Open with exactly what's happening. We'll have to see.
Yeah, I know that, like, the trailers make it seem like he very much died. They even had like
totally
the
did.
death certificate, and had a date on it. It said November 11th, 96. So this is actually taking place in 96. So very interesting.
Right at the end, yeah. Interesting. Mm-hmm. Now, since Mr. Sinister is our villain for this new season, wasn't he in the last few episodes or somewhere in the original series? Like, his story wasn't completed, and this is kind of, they're going to kind of pick up his story this sequel series, right?
Yeah. So as with a lot of the villains in the original animated series, he was kind of had a big arc in one of the seasons, and then kind of popped up here and there throughout the rest of the series. So the last we would actually have seen of him was in a flashback episode in season 5, where it's Mr. Sinister's origin story, but it's set in the 1800s because that's when he's from. But most of his story was throughout season 2 of the original series. So he had his genetic lab in the Savage Land, and so he was, as he is in the comics, obsessed with the Summers and the Gray DNA and genetics. So Scott and Jean, he's always been obsessed with them. But at the end of season 2, he gets literally like blown apart, like blown to pieces at the lab, and we just see that he's still out there. Like, there's this really hilarious animation of his face laughing in the sand. Yeah. But we know, like, it tells us like he's still out there somewhere. He's gonna come back. But that was basically the last we actually saw of him in the original.
Okay, so fill us in a little bit on Mr. Sinister, because when you look at him, his skin is silver, and he kind of wears this big cape and horns. Like, he looks like a demon from hell. Mm-hmm. What is his story? If you can give us a little bit of a character breakdown. What's his powers? What's his abilities? Why is he into experimenting on the mutants? Like, what's his deal?
Yeah, it's gonna be brief, because as with a lot of comics, there's lots of retcons and alternate histories, and you're like, is this one real or is this one real? What's the actual one?
Right.
But basically, he was born Nathaniel Essex. Like, that's his real name, is Nathaniel Essex. And he was a geneticist, a scientist from the 1800s in, I believe, London or somewhere in England.
Right.
And he was just always obsessed with the idea of mutations within humans. So even before, like, mutants themselves started popping up, he was just obsessed with, like, the genetic potential of humans and mutations. So he was so obsessed with that, like, he started experimenting on himself. He experimented on his wife to try to save her initially from a disease. She died, as a lot of this happens. Yep. But he basically experimented on himself so much, like, that he, for lack of a better term, kind of became immortal. And that's why he also looks so messed up. Like, he basically mutated himself to the past of, like, looking human.
Yeah.
And he, throughout the X-Men run, he's been a mutant geneticist, kind of like an evil mad scientist type of guy who pops up a lot to torture Jean and Scott a lot, because for some reason he's really obsessed with the Summers Jean line, their DNA and all of that.
Yeah.
Which we'll definitely get to in some of the speculation. I have a little bit right here, but I don't know if we want to save that till we get to the talk of Jean being pregnant.
Sure, yeah, you can save it for that.
throughout all of that, so that's what he does a lot. He's also really big into cloning. He has clones of himself that pop up, so if he dies, he's got another clone ready to go. And there's a couple different versions of Mr. Sinister. Like, right now there's a Dr. Stasis, which is another clone of him, and there's a Mrs. Sinister clone of him. There's like there's a lot of Sinister in the X-Men comics. He comes back a lot.
So does he have any abilities? He's just so he more outwits the X-Men and tricks them to get what he needs from them. He doesn't actually have powers, does he?
I am not 100% positive on that. I don't know that deep of a dive into Mr. Sinister. He might definitely have, I think he has some form of maybe like a healing ability to himself, or an heightened strength that he mostly kind of like activated or gave himself through all of his experiments.
Yeah, that's more of those things. He was maybe trying to steal powers and abilities from mutants to give to himself, yeah. Interesting. Well, it'll be cool. I mean, he's one of those guys that was around. I remember there was a massive series in the comics, and I think I still have it. Was it Fall of the Mutants or something? There was a series that went through the X-Men, the X-Factor, the New Mutants. It went through like 5 or 6 different books, and it was Mr. Sinister basically attacking all of them. And I can't remember what the name of it was one of those cross-issue multi-story events that they used to do back in the 80s and the 90s, where it was like an annual story where it would hit multiple books, and you had to buy all the books just to follow the entire story. And one of them was based on him, and I can't remember the name of it. If it's not Evolution or something it was called, I believe. Evolution,
that might have been it.
Yeah.
It sounds more, because Fall of the Mutants was different.
Yeah, so Evolution sounds more familiar, yeah. So, but that's what I remember Mr. Sinister from. So it'll be cool to see what they do with him. He's one of those guys. Well, let's dive into the trailer, and I'm gonna do we'll do a little Shadowcat clip here.
I could just like phase through the gizmo and like quietly short it out.
Yes. X-Men Evolution.
There you go. Yeah, that's where she was. So I got a few clips from her. Let's talk about the trailer. So we're just gonna go through it kind of step by step here. Some of the things I pulled out. The very first thing we get is a reminder of Xavier saying goodbye, like you previously talked about, talking to all the X-Men and how proud he is of them. I forgot how emotional that was. I remember now being really upset and definitely having tears in my eyes from him saying goodbye to everybody. It was not an easy scene.
Yeah. They just took the some of the scenes from that last episode and put it into the beginning. You're gonna get everyone from the 90s crying immediately from the trailer. But it's a good way to recap what happened and then tell new audiences like, hey, we're picking up right from here. This is what it is.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, I have a note a little farther down, but the executive producer, I watched just a brief little intro with him, and he says that this show actually takes place the very next day. From the ending of the original series, it starts the next day. So like, you can't get any more sequel than that.
Yeah.
Yep. Just continuing on. What I want to talk about is the animation style. I love the look that we get in the trailer. It's like they took the old footage from the original series and just cleaned it up to like 4K crystal clarity. It's just, you can tell that they've changed it a little bit. It's a little bit updated, but the design is so familiar looking, and I just love it. It's beautiful looking.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I really like the animation too. There is a little bit of like, it's not maybe as smooth like in all of the action as some other animation styles, but I don't mind that for this. It probably helps with all the power sets and things.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people online were like, it looks ugly, it looks weird. I'm like, no, it doesn't. It looks stylized. It looks great.
Yeah. Well, and I think the executive producer, he said, we wanted to keep it very familiar. They wanted to feel like you're jumping right back into it. Of course, they had to update it with the high resolution and stuff like it. But it feels like you're coming back home to something you know so well. Very cool. Well, what can we pick out from what the trailer gives us? What can we pick out about the story? And like I said, the executive producer says it literally takes place the very next day. But you mentioned this earlier. It looks like the anti-mutant protests are still going on, and in fact, they're getting worse. Like, we see just a ton of people picketing and protesting outside of some building somewhere, and it just looks like it's not a good situation. They're rising up against, we don't want mutants. Go back home. Get out of here.
Yeah, I have a feeling it's going to be fairly political, which is one of the things I really like about the X-Men. It doesn't shy away from that stuff. And that's always been at the heart of the X-Men stories, really, so much of it. I'm glad. I mean, I'm not glad that mutants are getting hated on, obviously, but I'm glad that they're not shying away from that right out of the gate for these stories.
Right. Yeah, me neither. You're right. X-Men has always taken on tough challenges with their story writing, and they're not scared, and it's great. It's great to see a show just hitting the hard topics and dealing with it the way their characters would deal with it. So it's good. Now, right after that, we kind of see some type of political meeting happening. It looks like they're like at a Senate or a summit even. They're in this government building. And there's a ton of people going on. There's some soldiers there. There's some police. But there's a caped person at the center. And he's wearing a purple cape and he's got white hair. And I'm looking at this assembly going, who could that be? Because who do I know that has a purple cape? And I didn't figure out until later in the trailer we see the costume from the front. And I'm like, oh, it's somebody who's changed the costume. But when you first saw this scene, what did you think?
I knew exactly what it was because
okay.
Yeah, because there's a very famous storyline in the comics that looks exactly like this. So I'm guessing they're gonna pull a lot of elements directly from that.
Well, tell it, because my next question is, what could this scene be about? What are your theories?
So I know you're beating around what character that is, but
just tell us.
I mean, it's Magneto.
Okay.
It's
I
Magneto,
mean, the white hair is telling. Yeah.
Yeah, and that design is actually a pretty comic accurate design of his comics in like mid to late 80s of what he had.
Yeah, because he's always had a purple cape, but I'm used to the red uniform.
Yeah,
on it. Yeah, so.
So it looks like, to me, they're in the UN, somewhere in the UN building, and they're going to do a version of the Trial of Magneto storyline. So, in the comics, he has to testify about a specific past crime that he committed. In the comic, he basically sent a armed missile towards I think it was a Russian town. It was evacuated, but it still happened. So basically he did that. So that didn't happen in the animated series. So I'm interested to see what exactly they're going to pull for the crime part. Yeah. But it definitely looks like he's going to do the trial of Magneto here, which will be really interesting, I think.
Cool. Well, I got some more ideas about Magneto farther down. We're just talking about the trailer in sequence, so we'll come back to him in a second. the next shot, one of the shots we see, there's a Sentinel arm. And if you guys don't know what the Sentinels are, they're basically gigantic robots. They're probably 100 feet tall, and they are one of the X-Men's worst nemesises. They can, when they fight with the X-Men, they can learn and be able to build their defenses around the X-Men's abilities, and then the X-Men can no longer attack them with the same abilities. They're really formidable villains. We've seen the X-Men destroy them, take them down time and time again, but somehow they just keep coming back. So the fact that we see this arm laying on the ground and there's a soldier in front of it taking off, I guess it was shrouded in like these super long sheets. It looks like he's clearing the arm off. Do you think there's a chance they're going to make an appearance and come back again in the series?
I mean, they're in the trailer later.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Oh, man, I totally forgot that.
Yeah.
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 You're right.
So I would say definitely.
Definitely. Okay. I mean, I love the Sentinels. Did you like them? They're scary.
They can be, I think you can make them really cheesy and you can make them really scary.
Yeah.
And some of the stories are really cheesy, and this is one thing, like in the live action, that I think they actually did well when they did the Days of Future Past movie, is when they did the Future Sentinels.
Oh my gosh.
I thought they were terrifying.
Yes.
I thought they did a great job of making them look terrifying.
Yep, I agree with you. That made them scary because we wanted the Sentinels to come to life. Like I thought that would have been one of the first things we got in all the movies, but it took them so long to show up. Mm-hmm. But man, they did them right. Yeah, freaky. It's scary. It's definitely scary. So that would be cool if we see those guys. Now, there's a shot of two statues outside what looks like a pyramid. That doesn't look like the school that gifted to me, so I'm not sure what this building is, but the two statues are of Professor X and Magneto, and while we see this scene, we hear Storm saying, "We must believe in each other." And I mean, if you were along for the ride through the entire original series and in the comic books, you know that Xavier and Magneto were friends from years and years ago, and they actually worked together for a long, long time trying to help humanity. But Magneto eventually tired of it and went his own way and thought the mutants should rise above and be, they're evolutionary ahead of humans and they should rule the planet. And that's where him and Professor X kind of parted ways. And anyway, that there's a huge history between them. So looking at this scene, what could this be? Like, what is this pyramid building, and why would there be two statues of them together as if they're working alongside each other in this scene? What does this mean to you here?
My guess is it's Genosha. That's my guess.
Okay.
So the design looks different than a lot of things we've seen in the comics. But I was trying to rack my brain. I was like, do I know if there's a pyramid base at some point in the history? Like all of this.
Yeah.
But I think I want to say it's probably Genosha, which is, for those who don't know, originally Genosha was an island that in the original animated series, it was basically an island where they would slave mutants to build different projects and all of these different things. But more recently, Genosha became basically the first sovereign island for mutants to be safe. So, and
Right.
Magneto led that for a lot of the history of the comics. So my guess is this might be a look at what Genosha is going to be.
Cool. I like it. So maybe we'll actually visit it in the show. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. I love. Oh, that's a great story because there's so much history. I mean, Magneto has been one of the worst villains, and he's been one of the strongest allies. Like his story is just crazy. How many times he's come and gone. So it'll be interesting to see. We're going to talk about him more again as it comes. Now, the next thing the question I had for you is, who is the bald guy? If you watch the trailer, there's quite a few scenes of the entire team, and there's this kid who's got white skin. He's pale as a ghost. He's bald. He almost has no facial features or anything at all. Who is that? Because I don't know who that character is.
Yeah, so that's Morph's updated look.
Oh, okay. So he's now faceless. Because when we first saw Morph, he was kind of like a weird skinny guy with like a long ponytail or something. Like,
yeah, he had hair and a face in the original animated series.
Okay.
But this is actually more akin to his comic book look. And there's been kind of different versions of Morph through the comic books.
Okay.
But this is the more kind of recent or the most well-known, and a lot of he was There's a series called Exiles, which is kind of an offshoot when he's a big featured character in that, and that's what they look like. Is the white, no hair, blank he almost looks like Voldemort. But,
yeah, like Voldemort. He looks like a mannequin that you see in a shopping mall that's got no clothes on. Like it's a weird look.
I mean, it kind of makes sense since that they're a shapeshifter, so
that's true.
They're probably just picking a very neutral, like, I want to look like a bald guy.
Yeah, and then that's his ability. He can shapeshift into anybody he wants. Now, does he have to see them to be able to mimic them, or can he just do it on cue?
I don't think so.
Like if he says, "I want to be a Russian soldier," he can be a Russian soldier and just change.
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because I don't know a lot about him. Now, looking at this scene, I question. I am totally mind blanking. What do the X-Men call their shuttle that they always use to fly all around the planet?
The Blackbird.
The Blackbird. Why couldn't I remember that? It's been with them. It's in the movies. It's in the comics. It's in the animated series. They always have this ship, and it's kind of funny because they have so many characters that could fly, but yet they all jump on the shuttle to travel. But looking at this screenshot, we see our main team: Cyclops, Beast, Wolverine, Storm, Gambit, Rogue. And you just told us some more. Is that Bishop in the back?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, they said that Bishop's going to be part of the main team.
Yeah.
For this too.
Yeah.
So I assume because the last we saw him, he's a time traveling character. That's not his power, but he time travels all the time.
And he's from the future originally.
And he's from the future. Yes. Yeah. So I'm pretty sure the last we saw him in the animated series, he was back in the future. So. He's in the present again, so
yeah. Well, hopefully
something happens. I'm sure
we have to find out why. Yeah, exactly. Why?
Maybe because of Xavier's death. Maybe he came back to try to prevent that and then get stuck. I don't know.
Well, he knows whatever happens to his future. He knows, there's certain events that have to happen to get to the future that he's in. So if his future keeps changing, he knows something's going on. So he's got to come back in time to figure it out, I guess. But yeah. Now, like you mentioned earlier, there is scenes with Jean Grey being pregnant, and Cyclops is holding her belly, and they have a nice little moment and stuff. And they're actually, if you look closely, there's a clip with Wolverine in the background, and he looks kind of sad.
Yeah.
But in another trailer, we actually see a baby. So it looks like during the course of this season, we're going to see her pregnant and giving birth, and they actually have a baby. So, holy cow, that is something new. Now, did they do that in the comic books? Because I didn't read that far.
Yeah. So I'm gonna get into it. But for those who have no idea about any of the stories, like you're gonna be like, Abby, this is complicated. And it's like, yes, it is complicated.
Okay. Can you simplify it for us?
I can try. Yeah. Okay. The Summers Gray timeline, bloodline, family tree is very complicated.
Now, when you say Summers Gray, so Cyclops is Scott Summers.
Yeah,
Jean Grey is Jean Grey, or
yes.
What's her mutant name they usually give her?
Jean Grey.
It's just Jean Grey. She never had another call sign, right?
She's originally went by Marvel Girl. Back in like the original days.
Yeah.
And then she was Phoenix.
Number one.
And then that was it. She's never really had another code name.
Okay, so
for the most part, they just call her Jean Grey.
All right. So when you say Summers and Grey, you're talking about Cyclops.
Yes, if I mention that, I'm talking about the two of them.
Yeah. Okay.
So in terms of kids in the comics, yes, they actually have 3. The first one is probably the more well-known of the characters. It's Nathan Christopher Summers, who most people know as Cable. So that's their son.
Wow, I forgot.
So, I'm gonna actually get a little more complicated into him, but I'm gonna say the other 2 first. And then their other 2 kids are Rachel Summers. So they have a daughter who has the same powers as Jean, but she's from the Days of Future Past timeline in the comics. So her timeline doesn't actually exist, but she's their future daughter.
Okay.
Who's now in the present. And then their third kid is Nate Grey, who's X-Man. Who's also
X-Man.
Yeah, not my favorite character in the world, but so they technically have 3 kids from various timelines because Nate Grey is very big in the Age of Apocalypse storylines. So a lot of alternate timeline kids that eventually find their way into the 616 main timeline. But to Cable. So this is something that with Mr. Sinister being involved, so there's been a lot of theorizing that the person who's pregnant isn't Jean, but it's actually her clone, Madeline Pryor.
Oh,
who is Cable's mom, who is actually Cable's mom between Madeline Pryor and Cyclops. But she's
Cyclops,
a genetic...
He didn't know it was her for, like, the time. Like, they took him a while to figure out that this is not actually Jean Grey.
Well, no. In the comics, he knew it was Madeline Pryor. This was after Jean had died after Dark Phoenix.
Yes, right.
And she just kind of shows up, and she looked exactly like Jean, and Scott is like, I love her now.
Yeah.
So, and they get married and have Cable, and then Cable gets sent into the future because he gets infected with a virus and all this complicated stuff that I won't go into. But then Cable time travels a lot as well.
Right. And doesn't he have like one metal arm? He's like the Winter Soldier, isn't he?
Yeah. He's got a metal arm. He's got some telepathic powers. He's got a bunch of other stuff going on.
Yeah, because I was going to ask you, like, when you're the child of Cyclops and Jean Grey, you got telekinetic powers and you got eye blast. Like, what do you get out of that? Like, that's some crazy mixing of genetics.
Mm-hmm. They tend to lean towards, like, Jean's side. A lot of them get either telepathy or some form of telekinesis or some form of, like, very strong mental powers. So, like, Nate Gray's the same. Rachel has both, and she's gone by Phoenix. Like, she's actually been the host of the Phoenix Force, but actually, like, in control, other than how, like, Jean has been a lot of the time. Yeah. So most of them don't tend to get anything from Cyclops' line.
Huh. Interesting. Okay, so I'm curious. I mean, this is a new cartoon. Will they follow any of this comic storylines, or will this baby be something different, or will it turn into Cable? I guess we'll see. We don't know how far they're going to go with that story. Like, how much of a time jump are we going to get?
Well, I know that Chris Potter is voicing Cable, so I assume this baby is probably going to be Cable.
Okay. So there must be a future scene then. They must...
Yeah, or he comes back to the present.
Oh, yeah, I guess, yeah, you're right, because of all the time jumping they can do on this show. Yeah,
that's probably going to be a cliffhanger. Like, the baby is born, the baby gets sent to the future, and then, like, a cliffhanger is going to be, like, Cable stepping out of a time portal being like, hello, parents.
I'm your son.
I'm here, yeah.
Because Cable, he wasn't always, like, he's not a good guy. Like, he was a little bit messed up, wasn't he?
Oh, yeah, he's got tons of trauma.
Yeah.
And I mean, he lived in the future, which was completely dystopian and ripped apart and all of these things. And so, yeah, he's got some baggage.
Yeah, he's a rough one for sure. Well, I want to talk about this one cool scene. Out of the entire trailer, I think this was the most awesome scene. It's a cool action shot. We see Gambit hop on Wolverine's back as he's running, and then Gambit grabs his claws and charges up his claws with his kinetic energy, and I just thought, oh my god, that is cool. We've never seen that done before. I've never seen Wolverine get his claws charged up. Can you just imagine what that's going to do for him? Kinetically charged adamantium claws. I
know, it's super cool. And it begs a little bit of the question, one for Gambit, because we've seen him, he can only charge things that aren't organic. So, like, he's probably just... Like, is he just charging all of Wolverine's skeleton? Like, adamantium skeleton in there?
Yeah, it makes you wonder.
Or is it, like, he gonna have control where he can charge it, and then they're gonna probably slice through a sentinel, and then he can release the charge before it, like, actually explodes. So, like...
Yeah.
Or I don't know, because Wolverine's skeleton is unbreakable, so...
Yeah.
He'd be potentially fine. He might blow up a little bit, but so
we know
it's really interesting.
Yeah, he can bounce back from it. What a cool idea! Like, I can't believe it's taken all these years for them to do that.
It's very cool.
Yeah, he's like, but it's just funny that Gambit's riding him, like, because those two have always been kind of a little contentious with each other. So it's just funny he's riding him like a horse.
Yeah,
but pretty cool. I can't wait to see what comes of that one scene. Now, in the synopsis that I read earlier, it says that Storm and Wolverine are now leading the team. But we see in this next shot, we see Cyclops call the team to him, and he says, "To me, my X-Men." which is a really cool moment, but it confuses me as to who's actually going to lead the team. What do you think? Like, why would the synopsis read something completely different when Cyclops, I think, is the most natural fit to lead the team?
Mm-hmm. And Cyclops has been their leader on and off for years and years.
Yeah, like their mission leader.
Mm-hmm, yeah, field leader. He's very competent at that. So I don't know what the order of things are going to be. If there's going to be time jumping, I assume there's time jumping because we've seen shots of normal Jean and then pregnant Jean. So I assume there's going to be some time jumps happening here and there.
Yeah.
So if this might be Cyclops starting out as the leader and then breaking into, I can't remember if I'm making this up or if I read this in an article somewhere that they're going to have two X-Men teams. So a lot of the time when they break into multiple teams in the comics, they have like X-Men Blue and X-Men Gold. So it might be that Storm and Wolverine are leading each of those teams, and Cyclops might end up being just kind of like taking a step back with, Jean being pregnant.
Right.
With all of that, he might be back and stay as like a home base, like a Felicity, staying back behind the computers and kind of leading from there.
Gotcha. Okay, well, that makes some more sense. Before I forget, I wanted to ask you, what is Bishop's ability again?
He can absorb energy, so like any kind, so like kinetic energy or like energy blast, and then he can redirect it.
So he can help other mutants. He can redirect it into a weapon. He can. Yeah.
That's why he carries. Sometimes it's just a gun, but sometimes he like channels his energy into the gun he carries and uses that as a blaster. Sometimes he's just hand blasting. Sometimes he goes like Super Saiyan and just kind of explodes with all of his energy. But yeah,
it's when you think about it, it's a pretty neat ability because he can just keep taking it and taking it and taking it, and the more you hit him, the stronger he's going to hit back. Mm-hmm. And it can also be scary too because it gets to a boiling point eventually. But pretty neat ability. I gotta call back to Cyclops being the leader of the team because later in the episode, like it actually, even after the ending credits of the trailer, they give you this bonus scene at the end. It's like a post-credits scene in the movie. We see Magneto show up at the School of the Gifted with Xavier's last will and testament, which, by the way, is as big as an encyclopedia. Yeah. I've never seen a will that's actually a full-on hardcover book. But he states that Xavier has left everything to him. That is a blow that I wasn't expecting, and I don't think the X-Men were expecting to hear that. Pretty crazy. I mean, just the fact that Xavier would leave it to Magneto and not to anybody on the team. What do you think of all of that?
Yeah, so I think in the comics, because there is a plot when Xavier does have to go in a very similar fashion to space because he's dying. And when that happens, Magneto does in fact take over the school. At this point, it's right after the trial of Magneto because Xavier's at the trial and trying to defend him and all of this stuff, and he ends up, leading the New Mutants for a while. He's training them instead of leading the X-Men themselves. But we don't really have much of the New Mutants in this show yet. I'm hoping we get to see a couple of them. I know Sunspot's there, but I'm hoping we get to see a few more. So that's what I'm thinking. They're playing off of that, but going more into the will. So this could be either like this is Xavier's real will. It was left to Magneto. He hasn't, updated it in 20 years, so they were still best friends in his will.
Or maybe, yeah.
Or it could be like a fake one. Who knows what Magneto is doing? But
well, let's talk about Magneto. Like, where did we last leave off with his story in the original series? Because he began as a villain, but there were times where he's joined them and he fought alongside them and he's helped them in many, many ways. And then we've seen him try to pull a few of them away. I can help you. Mutants are better. Come fight with me. Like, where did we last leave off with his story? Is he a trusted friend now, or is he still a villain that we can't agree with?
At the end of 92, Magneto was basically rallying mutants and was going to plan to fight back. There's either it's just in the last episode or the last handful. I think he was beginning to create like his version of Genosha. So he had kind of all of his followers, all of that was happening, and then he stops it because he learns that Charles is dying. So he kind of puts that all on pause and goes to Xavier to, be by him before he goes up into space and all of that is happening.
Right.
So they left it kind of rocky. So like he wasn't fully in the X-Men's trust at that point. He was still doing his own path, his own form of, resistance and revolution on mutant kind's behalf. But the X-Men had allowed them into, the mansion to see Xavier, and Xavier still trusted him at that point. They weren't seeing eye to eye, but in the very end, he wasn't seeing him necessarily as an enemy. So it's rocky ground between Magneto and the rest of the X-Men still. So I'm sure that's going to be part of the plot points, is trying to gain Magneto's trust and vice versa and all of that.
Yeah, because it's so weird. Like with his story, he's proven himself many times, but then he's betrayed their trust as well. And I mean, you can see in the scene when he shows up, you can see they all got their abilities ready. They're ready to fight him because they don't yet trust him. So it'll be interesting to see where it goes, because there's other clips in the trailer that it looks like he is now with them and they're actually following him. Because we hear Magneto in part of the trailer talking about Xavier's dream and that it didn't work and things need to change. And Jean Grey is saying that this is what Xavier wanted, so she maybe read the will. But Cyclops he thinks it's wrong. He doesn't agree. So there's going to be a lot of contention, I think, this season until they eventually trust Magneto. But we get that shot, like I said, the scene with the team coming together, and we hear Magneto say, "It's time, my X-Men." And then there's a shot of Magneto hovering above the school, and the X-Men are all underneath him, preparing for battle. So, is he eventually going to take over leadership of the team, and they are eventually going to follow him? Can the team trust and work with Magneto after all these years? Like, I think, like you said, this is going to be a storyline that goes throughout the season, and I wonder when that's going to happen, when they actually do trust him, when we get that moment when he's in the sky, and he's in a different uniform. His suit is now entirely purple with a gigantic M on his chest, which is completely different than what I'm used to seeing. So it'll be interesting to see if this is an all-season storyline and what's going on there. Like, I don't know. What are your thoughts to all of that?
Yeah, I'm thinking it'll be at least half of the season. I know it's only 10 episodes, so that's not a huge amount of time. And I don't know where in that timeline of episodes like the trial's gonna happen. I don't know if that's gonna be like one of the very first things
right away,
or if that's gonna be later in the season. Like maybe they finally earned each other's trust, because this is what happens in the comics. They've basically finally earned each other's trust. He's been working with the X-Men for a little bit, and then he gets taken into trial. So it could be an interesting, story beat if they finally gain each other's trust and then he gets arrested, and the UN comes like knocking into the mansion. So that could be really interesting. Or it could be the first thing that happens. It could be the first episode. I have no idea.
Well, actually, your point, if you think, because when these studios give us the trailers, they do not give us a trailer in chronological order. They match up a bunch of scenes. So I'm wondering if the scene when he's hovering above the school and the X-Men are defending with him, that's when the government, the soldiers are coming to get him to say, you're arrested and you're going to be on trial. And then the scene where we're inside the Senate there and it looks like he's on trial, that could be next. Maybe it happens in that sequence.
Yeah. If this does literally take place like the next day, directly after the finale, all of the X-Men plus Magneto were at the mansion. So, like, it could be really interesting if that scene when the UN comes knocking is literally minutes after Xavier goes to space.
Yeah.
So, no idea. I don't know. I'm excited to see what direction they go with it.
Yeah, me too. It'll be really, really cool. Well, our last thing we're going to talk about is you got a couple questions here for us. How the show is going to go. What do you want to end our initial preview with?
Yeah. So we've walked our way through one trailer. I know they've released a ton of trailers and marketing videos, which has been great. Like, they've been marketing the heck out of this, which has been really cool.
Yeah, we just covered the official trailer. Yeah.
But yeah, I just wanted to kind of end our preview on what are we most excited about for the show? Like, what are we looking forward to the most, and what expectations do we have?
That's a good question, and it's a broad one because having only 10 episodes, it's really like, are they going to focus on one storyline all the way through, or are we going to get 3 episode arcs where they deal with something for 3 episodes and then they move on to the next one and it's broken down? Or 2 episode arcs, I have no idea. Or we're going to have any quote unquote filler episodes where not a lot happens. I don't know. So I think for me, I would like to see a true storyline happen all season long. Excuse me, all season long. I think it would just be more cohesive and just more dramatic. It just keeps you thoroughly invested throughout the whole thing. You can have like side quests and side things happening that they branch off to go do, but always there's this underlining story of what's going on. And if that's the Magneto story, or if it's the Sentinel story, or if it's the humans against mutant story, I don't know, maybe all of them will happen. So that's the first thing I want is a solid story. I mean, the fun thing, I just want lots of Rogue. She's got to be in this. I want to hear her. I want to see what she does. I want to hear, there's got to be a lot of Rogue. I don't know if they're going to continue. Rogue and Gambit always had this on again, off again romance. I don't know if I need that anymore. We've had that a long time. I want to see them progress and mature, and I think that's a good way. Is all the characters, let's see them grow a little bit now that they're having to face this life without Professor X. Let's see them mature and grow and become the next level of themselves that they need to become. I'll end it there and let you share some thoughts, and then we'll keep going.
Yeah, I mean, this is what I have for everything I ever watch, but is good character moments and development. Yeah, because that's what I really love about TV and movies and all of this stuff, is watching characters grow and develop. And when I'm reading my comic books, I know comic books can be hard because there's a lot of like regression to the mean or taking characters back, like resetting timelines and things of that nature, which I don't always love, just for the sake of, characters being around for 50, 60 years. Like, what do you do with them? But the animated shows have always been really good at actually like diving into character and making sure there's room for character growth and it's not all plot. That they have those moments. So I'm really excited about that. And from what I've seen from all the trailers and the clips, I don't think I'm going to be disappointed in that area, which is great. And I'm excited. They've promised that there's going to be a lot of cameos, which is fun. So whether that be other mutants or other Marvel characters, like Captain America or any of the Avengers might show up. Could be really interesting.
I saw a screenshot of Captain America. I think he's coming. Yep.
That could.
Yeah.
But I'm excited to see what other mutants show up. One of the trailers has Nightcrawler.
Yes.
Flinging around with the swords, which is great. I love Nightcrawler.
Yeah.
And just to see, like we said, there's probably going to be a lot of characters that were in the original that'll make appearances, but also like there's been that ended in 96, 97. So there's been 30 years of comic books since then. So it's going to be really interesting to see like how they mesh what was the history then of the comics, and if they're going to try to incorporate a lot of characters or storylines that have happened since then, which I know there's going to be probably some, because we didn't mention it in the trailer breakdown, but there is a newspaper with a bunch of Easter eggs that floats by at one point. It mentions the Hellfire Gala, which is something that they've done in the most recent Krakoan age of X-Men, which is really interesting. So it feels like they're going to take some of these things that have happened in the last 30 years and be able to put it into kind of the 90s context. So I'm really interested. I'm really excited to see like who we're going to see and like what elements of the X-Men universe we're going to see in there. Obviously, I would love to see Kitty Pryde appear since she didn't get to be in the 90s show.
Yeah.
So if she's a surprise appearance, I would have a good time with that.
You'd be happy with that. Yep.
I would be happy. And then I think like a lot of the speculation from the trailers, I want to see how those play out. Like if that's going to be Madeline Pryor, if it's going to be Jean. what
Right.
Mr. Sinister's doing. Like, I'm just very excited because this is the first new X-Men media that not comics, so like animation or a TV show or movie that we're getting since I don't know. I don't even count like the New Mutants movie or like some of the newer movies are just so bad.
Or the one that they tried to do the Phoenix story on, the
Dark
last
Phoenix, it
X-Men
wasn't great.
movie. Oh my god, that was awful.
Yeah, so that was 2019, 2020.
Yeah,
so that was
so
the last time we got something. And so I'm just really excited to have new X-Men content and something that looks really good and actually in line with the ethos of the X-Men and caring about the characters. So I'm just really excited to have something new.
Well, yeah, I totally share your excitement. Because you just said it's been 30 years. Like, that's insane.
Yeah.
30 years since I watched this cartoon, and they're bringing it back after all this time with the original voice actors. It's a lot to be excited about. But I liked your point about there's been 30 years of comic books written. Will they bring, like, say, a story from 2015 and insert it into a 1997 storyline? Like, it's interesting how much they could do. Or do they look at where comics and the X-Men were in 97 and they only take those stories from that era? It'll be interesting to see what they do.
Yeah, it'll be interesting because I can see them adapting more contemporary storylines just to fit that period though.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because, you know, society, culture, the politics were different in 90s than it is today. So trying to kind of adapt 90s stories for a more modern audience, or are they going to try to adapt more contemporary stories into a 90s setting? It's going to be really interesting to see what they do there.
Yeah. And speaking of characters, I think it would be fun if they brought Spider-Man in, because he has visited the X-Men many times. There's been lots of talk about, is he actually a mutant? And they've explored that idea and stuff, even though he was bit by a spider. He wasn't born with it. But I just love that they've explored that, and he's fought alongside them. And I mean, Peter Parker and his snarkiness, I mean, he perfectly suits a guest spot if they bring him in. It'd be a lot of fun. Of course, bring in some Avengers or, you know, whoever. If there's going to be a lot of cameos, I think it'll be fun. Do you think one character I wonder they would bring, would Juggernaut come around? With Professor X being his brother, would Juggernaut come around?
I think so. I mean, Juggernaut showed up in the original quite a few times. He's kind of been a mainstay character in the X-Men comics over the years. So I feel like he'd probably be like, "Oh, my brother is dead," like, and I didn't get to do it. Like, he's gonna show up, probably, and cause some problems for a little bit.
Yeah, and every time he shows up, it's always a great fight because he has that helmet that protects him from a lot of stuff, and it's kind of similar to the Avengers trying to pull the glove off of Thanos. The X-Men are always trying to get the helmet off of Juggernaut, and that can stop him, and so someone can attack him mentally or whatever. Like, he's a lot of fun. He's a cool character.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you can. I guess it's all blurry, but I do have a big Juggernaut behind me.
Okay.
Yeah, I know the camera is blurry, but that's a whole shelf of Rogue. That's why it's green lights, and then I just spotted Havok's actually hiding over there, so I'll pull him over next time. But I think because they left the trailer so open-ended without giving away too much, I'm just with you. I'm excited with what they showed us and what storylines they're going to give us. It is only 10 episodes, so it's going to go quick. I mean, they're giving us 2 episodes right off the bat, and then after that, they're just half-hour episodes, like you said. I'm probably guessing 22 minutes, 25 minutes, 27 minutes. Well, it's going to be all over the place, but I'm just excited. Just looking forward to what they give us, and then I hope it's so successful that they realize, okay, we got to keep this going, and they sign up for another 3 or 4 seasons.
I would love that. Yeah. I would, because I think this is kind of the start of the new kind of like Marvel animation sector.
Yeah, they've
had mostly What If has been like kind of the biggest for the MCU, but this is kind of like, they said this isn't MCU, this is just its own division of Marvel Animations, which is great because they can be a little more open with the storylines. They don't have to follow the continuity of the MCU. Like we've said a lot, but DC does great in animation and Marvel's been lacking, so maybe this is the start, or Marvel can actually get back into really successful animated shows and movies, because I love animation, so I would love to see more. Like, if we can get multiple X-Men animated shows, movies, I'd be great for years. So.
We would be very satisfied. And also, we have to, like, they are introducing slowly the X-Men into the cinematic universe. So this cartoon could kickstart or revive the interest and passion for the X-Men again. And then once they start coming into the movie world, people are just going to go nuts. So it could be a very smart move by Marvel. And you're right, they've needed something. They have not done very good in the animation in a long time, so they do need something, and this looks like it'll be it. So could be it. Well, let's end this. I'm going to transition into our final talk.
Like, what is it with guys and explosions anyway?
A little bit of Shadowcat, and then one more from my favorite. Here we go.
You look a little on the weary side, honey. Been a long shift.
How can you not love Rogue when she talks like that? Come on. So we want to just give you guys a reminder that the X-Men 97 is going to start this Wednesday. It's going to be a weekly show. First 2 episodes are this Wednesday, and then it'll be every Wednesday, 1 episode after that on Disney+. And that we are going to be recording our thoughts on Thursday nights. So we just want to remind you guys that. And before I go on too far, to send in feedback, the same email as always, tomorrowslegendspodcast@gmail.com. Here is your reminder on how to do that.
If you would like to be a part of the show, you can send in your feedback to tomorrowslegendspodcast@gmail.com. You can also reach us on Twitter @tomorrowslegends. We'd love you to join our Facebook page at facebook.com/groups/tomorrowslegends and become part of the community.
So I have to ask, what do you think of being on the hosting side of things? You've been listening to us for so many years, and now you're in the back room. You're under the editing and the production of the whole show.
I am. I think I've done 1 or 2 like guest hosts when someone else couldn't be there.
Yep.
And obviously we've done all of our Patreon hangouts. But I'm excited to jump into the hosting seat. I've hosted a couple other podcast episodes here and there for other things, but if there's any to get back into podcasting with, it's the X-Men, so I'm really happy that we get to talk about this.
Well, you've done very well on your first episode, so I'm very grateful that you decided to join me, and I'm glad that we're going to get all your X-Men knowledge, because already in this episode you reminded me a lot of things I forgot, so that's why I brought you on. You're gonna be the knowledge base, and I'm gonna just run the show. I think we'll be a good tandem. It'll be a good show. So hopefully we get a lot of people excited and want to join us. So send in your thoughts. Remember, you do have a short turnaround, but join the show, guys. We will be right back in your ears again this Thursday night. This is Havok signing off,
and this is Shadowcat.
Tomorrow's Legends is not affiliated with CBS, Warner Brothers, HBO, or the CW. We're a fan-made podcast for entertainment purposes only and are part of the Cybercast network. Be sure to check out our partner shows, The Mandalore and Dive into DC, covering your favorite Star Wars and DC Comics properties. Thanks for listening.